If you like the Young Turks podcast, I think you'll love a lot of the podcasts on the TYT network. Old School, it's one of my favorites, one of the favorites for a lot of the listeners. Please check that out, subscribe, share it. That makes a big difference, and give it a 5-star rating. Thank you.
Welcome everybody to the Young Turks. I almost said damage report, but I got through it. This is the Young Turks. I am John Iadarola. Adrienne's back in studio.
I am, so glad to be here.
And Jayar Jackson.
You have the rest of the hour to make sure you mess that up, though.
I already pretty much ruined it there. But anyway, it is going to be a big show. We got a great second hour planned as well that Brooke is going to be leading you through. But before that, we do have, fun news. Video was made of Trump killing all of us and other members of the media, so that's going to be fun. We're going to respond to that. Bernie Sanders' new plan to remake corporate America is just chock full of really interesting proposals that we're gonna break down. The situation in Syria. Everyone predicted that Trump's policy change would result in just a smooth path ahead, but it actually has gotten a little bit rocky, weird. And William Barr, he's our AG, but he seems to be auditioning for like a cardinal or something, so we're gonna break that down too. Anything else we need to get to before we launch into it?
I think we're good.
Okay, so much big news, and I can't wait to talk about the people who are trying to get us killed, so that's gonna be fun. But before that, it's a holiday, so we're gonna start there. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, but it wasn't always that way. It used to go by a different name, which we will touch on in just a little bit. But let's talk about how we got to the place where now at least 10 states now celebrate some version of Indigenous Peoples Day on the second Monday in October, like Hawaii's Discoverers Day or South Dakota's Native Americans Day. Many college campuses have dumped Columbus Day for Indigenous Peoples Day, as have more than 100 cities, towns, and counties across the country. So it is still at least a little bit far away from being a universal across the country, but an increasing number of cities, states, and especially college campuses are taking part. Indigenous peoples first proposed the day back in 1977 at a United Nations conference on discrimination against them. But it wasn't until 1989 that South Dakota became the first state to switch Columbus Day to Native Americans Day, celebrating it for the first time in 1990. And so at least from that first one, we now have several decades of this day.
Yes, yeah, and it's an important day to recognize, and to recognize it properly, especially considering what we had before, which was, Columbus Day. And that was just marking someone who was committing genocide, raping, and slaughtering a peoples. So it's very good to recognize the actual people as opposed to.
So I guess a couple of directions with this is, when you look at also when it was first introduced in 1977 for it to happen, and the first state took it up in '89, and now it's 2019, and now it's a big deal that a few hundred counties, towns, and cities in a few states do it now. It kind of shows how slow moving things are when it comes to actually doing something about a problem or recognizing things the way they really were. We've got plenty of people throughout our history that were like this, leaders of the country that were like this, and we don't like to revisit those people's lives in an accurate way and say what happened and say, we've been making a mistake about this whole time, get rid of it. I don't see why it's so hard until you notice that we do this on many other things. All the time. So we talk about Confederate statues in the South coming down a few years ago when everyone's getting upset about that, and even the president now jumped into it and said, you're getting rid of our history. Well, there's some history that happens that you may not want to actually remember the way it was, so you do it, you recreate it the way you want to here. And so I'm hoping that because the ball is rolling, there's no more, my kid's in school today. There's no more getting out of school for this day, so you have to tell your kid, hey, by the way, you're not in school today, but let's not celebrate the person that has allowed you to get to this point to be out of school so you can have your little, your video game day, or whatever it is you get out of this. What are you supposed to reflect on when Christopher Columbus Day? Exactly. There's a concerted effort to make sure we remember him for some reason in 2019, and we have to get away from that and understand that we can change the way we remember people.
Yeah, and kind of just to back up what you said, because it's so important in terms of erasing history and pretending certain things didn't happen, that is something that seems to kind of just be a very rhythmic, natural part of, unfortunately, American society, where people are attacked, murdered, slaughtered, killed, or in some way held down or marginalized, and yet our society wants to rewrite what happened in the history books to make it seem like those things didn't happen, or that it's that particular group's problem, and that's why they have the plight that they do. And unfortunately, that's a lot of people who are invested in maintaining the status quo and the thought that everyone had an equal opportunity in where they are. Yet we see so many Indigenous people continue to struggle and suffer because all they have is a legacy of being raped, pillaged, and essentially set back and held back. And there's been no acknowledgement for it.
Exactly, and so what we have been doing for the last couple of years is on this day, we both celebrate the day it should be, and then also remind people of why this switch needs to happen. And so we have a set of facts about Christopher Columbus that I like to go over. I hope that eventually everyone will just accept these things, but judging by responses to my tweets this morning, it is not common knowledge. So we're gonna talk a little bit about who Christopher Columbus actually was and what he did. First of all, you asked, what are we supposed to be remembering this for? Well, theoretically, sort of like the spirit of discovery, as he's the man who discovered America, even though he didn't. He got close, but he didn't discover it, and other people had already discovered it hundreds of years earlier. So just bear that in mind. But then once he finally got over here, what did he do? Well, we actually know quite a bit, not just based off of sort of like rumor and innuendo, but his own writings from the time, the writings of other people who worked directly with him. So let's take some excerpts from those things, including a letter that he sent back to Spain that said, there are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand, and for all ages, a good price must be paid. That might seem weird, but you don't understand yet. That's because they held and used and traded child sex slaves. That was what Columbus would do. He would gather up sex slaves from the indigenous population, and then if he liked someone as a reward, he would give them a child to rape for the rest of their life. That's blunt, I guess, but that's what he did. And I feel like at this point, we should probably be blunt about our historical figures. So he did that. And others who were beneficiaries of his gifts of this sort wrote things like this. While I was in the boat, I captured a very beautiful woman whom the Lord Admiral Columbus gave to me. When I had taken her to my cabin, she was naked, as was their custom. I was filled with a desire to take my pleasure with her and attempted to satisfy my desire. She was unwilling and so treated me with her nails that I wished I had never begun. I then took a piece of rope and whipped her soundly, and she let forth such incredible screams that you would not have believed your ears. Eventually, we came to such terms, I assure you, that you would have thought she had been brought up in a school for whores. That's because he wanted to rape this woman, and when she resisted, he began beating her until eventually she submitted. And that was the present that Christopher Columbus gave to this individual.
And this is
I know there's not really much to say, honestly. Coming face to face with the history is hard sometimes, I guess. Let's talk about some other numbers, though. At one point, Columbus ordered 1,500 men and women seized, letting 400 go and condemning 500 to be sent back to Spain as slaves. Another 600 were enslaved on the island. About 200 of the 500 sent home died on the voyage, so they died while being sent to be slaves and were thrown into the ocean. Let's see, at one point, so they had this thing where if you didn't, actually we have that, so I'll get to that. Multiple sources at the time confirmed accounts of exhausted Indian carriers chained by the neck whose heads the Spaniards severed from their bodies so they might not have to stop to untie them. Because they would chain a bunch of people together by their necks, and unchaining all of them when someone died or was disobedient would take time, so they just cut off the person's head to make it easier to remove.
These are who these people are, and it's insane that there are still so many schools in this nation that celebrate this man raping and pillaging and literally torturing and just absolute genocide.
Yeah.
Yet celebrated.
Yeah, it's and until someone asks the question over and over again, why are we celebrating a Hitler-like figure in our history when we'll talk about all the things that Hitler did and the people he targeted, but we won't talk about this? Why not? Yeah. Maybe because
it's us.
And I hate to take it here, but people are still, again, there's a reason why these things continue on. Yes. We have these baseball teams named the Indians. We have this football team, named the Redskins. The Indians, the Braves, the Redskins, Seminoles. And I know some of these tribes have allowed them to use their names for things like that. So then also when you get an entire a stadium full of people doing tomahawk chops, and Indian calls is what they think. And then someone says, I think a celebrity pointed out, I said, man, this is crazy. People still do this in 2019 and got lambasted on Twitter for saying such a thing. Yeah, they still do that. And it's still, yes, it is a weird thing, because I think that's what he asked. He goes, is it a weird thing that people still do this? They go, oh, stop talking all that trash about us. Maybe stop doing it. You won't have to try and defend yourself for these things. But it's ingrained in us because of things like this. I grew up going to school and hear about Columbus Day all the time, Columbus Day, and not really knowing why. But then after you see all these things that everything leads to something else. Our history leads to us being a certain way now. That's one of the ways that we are right now. And people think, oh, Native Americans only have these casinos, and there's so many stereotypes that come with what we do. And we have to understand where they come from, and that's how you cut off that source of ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah,
If we don't want to, we'll continue to be ignorant and elect presidents like what we have now. Sorry to connect it that way.
And also, if we don't do kind of what you're suggesting in terms of standing up and acknowledging the history, it's because essentially by doing that, you'd have to recognize that these people are whole people who are deserving of respect and that there was a wrong done to them. It's for the same reason that there's been no apology for slavery, because then they'd have to recognize that we as blacks are whole people deserving of respect and all the entitlements that this nation has promised people. But this is the way our society works in terms of not acknowledging that and continuing to tell us that we're all equal, yet some of us seem to be messing up on just because we, of our own accord.
Yeah, I got, so you mentioned genocide. I got one more graphic I want to read in a second, but I've noticed in tweeting about this, and I put up an Instagram post, there's certain types of reactions that tend to be most common. For the most part, I think they just represent, some people just don't want to think about. Like, there's a certain amount of a cognitive load that we have to carry, and the more you pay attention to the news, the more attention you pay to politics, the more you stay aware of what's going on, the more of a load you feel. And I 100% get that. I'm a wreck recently from just being exposed to too much stuff. So I get that, and I understand that many people just want to find things that make things simpler. Here's one way to do that. Just switch it over and you don't have to stop thinking about it every year. Honestly, stop pretending that you care about Christopher Columbus. Literally nobody cares about Christopher Columbus. You pretend that you do because you like the day off, you'll still get that, it'll just have a different name. But one of the responses I saw was, it was like an attempt to add some counter history to this. It was like, well, this was established at a time when the Italian immigrant community, which was also treated poorly, not nearly as badly as virtually every other immigrant community in America, but treated badly. It was like they needed a figurehead, someone to take pride in. I'm Italian, don't care, get rid of him. There's no other Italians, honestly. I would choose a fictional one, Rocky Balboa, there we go. He's not even real, I don't care, he's better than Christopher Columbus. And to give you an idea about how bad this is, I mean, this should be enough. And like the child sex slavery, like a lot of people, the remark always is, why are we judging people by modern sort of values? Okay, maybe that makes sense for like a 90s sitcom, not for giving children as sex slaves. People at the time knew that was bad.
Yeah.
Everybody has always agreed that raping children is bad. Some people still did it, they're horrible people and we shouldn't memorialize them, but we had an idea that it was bad at the time. So overall, what effect he had when he landed, there were about 300,000 inhabitants of Hispaniola in 1492. Between then and 1496, 100,000 died. So it took 4 years to kill 1/3 of the population, half due to a mass suicide of 50,000 people, because of how horrible the situation was after just a few years. In 1508, just less than a decade later, the population was down to 60,000. Within 40 more years, it was estimated to be only 500 individuals. So they landed on an island that had 300,000 people, and when they left, you could put them in a gymnasium. That's the effect that Christopher Columbus and his mission had. And along the way, they got a bunch of gold, they brought some slaves home. Nothing about this should be celebrated. It should be taught. We should learn about it. Kids should learn about Christopher Columbus. They don't, they hear about him, but they don't learn about him. I'm in favor of learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, glad to see more states switching over to a far better idea for the holiday. Okay, we're gonna take a short break. We come back, this video targeting TYT and other members of the media, we're gonna respond to it.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFDR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
For this. Welcome back to the Young Turks, everybody. Before we get back into the news, I wanted to read a few of your comments. I see, let's see, Curious Artemis, I like that name, says, I knew Columbus was bad, but John's facts here are chilling. Thanks for sharing, guys. People need to know. Yeah, especially because schools are just never going to teach it. But although, honestly, you could do this sort of thing for almost any period of history, any area of the world. And it would scare people. Let's see. I bathe in a very stable genius's tears, says the celebration of Columbus Day is the celebration of conquering. We have many holidays that are all about conquering, and since conquering is about the winning, we never mourn the losers. That is very true. Let's see, those were member comments on hashtag TYT Live. Let's see, Eidetic Moronori says history is usually written by the victors, and the worst parts of how these victories came to be and the behaviors of these people are forgiven and are usually swept under the rug. Information is a funny thing though, it wants to spread. Radio cemented Hitler. I don't understand that last part necessarily, but I agree with the main thrust of what you're saying there. Also, by the way, as we go into tomorrow where we have the debate coming up, the Democratic debate, we do have some events that you can possibly take part in. Cenk is going to be in Westerville, Ohio for that 4th Democratic primary debate. So we're going to have an Ohio meetup as we've been doing at most of these so far. You can see there that's a photo of our Detroit debate from just a couple months ago. You can come meet Cenk at the Renaissance Westerville Polaris Hotel at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, October 15th. He's going to be joined by Xavier Carrion, a TYT superfan and congressional candidate in Ohio's 5th district. You can get all the information by signing up at tyt.com/rally. And Xavier will also be hosting a debate watch event later that night, location to be determined. So sign up there and you'll be able to find out about that. We're of course going to be covering the debate that night. Let's see, you can see that starting at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific time, that's tomorrow. Find out the winners and losers with commentary by Anna Kasparian, myself, Ida Rodriguez, and Cenk is gonna be Skyping in from Ohio. You can tune in at tyt.com/live. And by the way, Cenk will be back the following day on Wednesday, and he's gonna be kicking off the conversation, which is gonna be renewed with interviews with Joel Stein and Marianne Williamson. So expect those, you can see on Wednesday as well. And with that, why don't we jump back into the news? At a Trump event over the weekend, a video that was apparently produced last year was played on a projector for the Trump fans. This was at a Trump property, and it shows Donald Trump viciously murdering all of his opponents effectively. You can see Mr. Trump's head superimposed on the body of a man opening fire inside the Church of Fake News. So he goes into this church and begins killing the people in the church. Again, this was made by a Trump fan, sort of weird. But anyway, logos of news media organizations, including PBS, NPR, Politico, The Washington Post, and NBC were put onto the faces of the people in the church that he is gunning down. He also shoots Black Lives Matter in the head and Vice News, and also, very fun, TYT. He murders the business that we work for or that we take part in. So that's fun. And this was again at one of his, an event for a group supporting him where his son was in attendance, where Sarah Huckabee Sanders, his press secretary, who for about 2 years pretended that Donald Trump did not support political violence against his opponents. They swear that they haven't seen it, but understand that they were at the event where this was playing.
Not only that, but the
Thoughts,
organizers of this group also said, "Hey, we have no idea how this worked." This was something that came in on the as a meme contest or section of our event that's being held at Trump's properties down in Florida. So the Trump people and the campaign and he himself have no idea how these rogue people came into his building. The people that are running it have no idea how this got submitted. The people that are running the event where they submit these things also have no idea how it got there. We're gonna look into it internally until we figure this whole thing out. In other words, we don't wanna talk about it. Let's just go into it and say, hey, you guys discovered something we were hoping we could keep secret, and now that you've discovered it, we don't know. Because that's become the excuse for doing horrific things. Every time Trump gets caught, he goes, I don't remember, I don't really know. When he got caught with the porn star payments and he was on the airplane, he goes, I don't know, I've never heard it. Now that Giuliani's running around the world talking about how he's worked for the State Department and Trump and trying to investigate folks. Trump says, I don't know. So this has become the brand for people that do this. I don't know. It just kind of showed up. I don't know who made it. I don't know why they made it. I don't know why we watched it. Nobody actually watched it. No one was there. It just got played on the projector and no one was in the middle of the room.
The building hasn't been built yet.
That's where we've gotten to this point now.
See, I love what you say, and you pointed out the whole I don't know. As a lawyer, I can tell you that's the I do not recall, because no one can essentially call you a liar. No one can say you're telling the truth. You just play dumb and you're just like, I don't know. But essentially, all of this anti-media journalism propaganda is so incredibly problematic, because right now is the most dangerous time for journalists. And there have been several organizations, Article 19, a human rights organization, they issued a report in 2019 showing that this is the most dangerous time. 78 journalists were killed in 2017, 326 in prison. And Donald Trump essentially demonizing journalists. This is why we're in this situation. And essentially, the voice for the people, it can't speak.
Yeah, I mean, he has developed this phrase, fake news, which originally had a meaning. Now it just means press that he doesn't like. He's tweeted that 600 times. He's called the media the enemy of the people on Twitter 35 times, even after people began murdering journalists in the US. And they like to write this off as like, there's been a lot of, to their credit, the media, the mainstream media has attacked this video and said that this is unacceptable, obviously, since many of them are being targeted in the video. But the right wing doesn't care. They think it's funny. It's a meme, like you said. We're having a meme contest. No. One of our producers, I saw a meme she made earlier today of her dog swimming with like the producer's problems around it, and she's just trying to keep her head above water. That's a meme. It's got an animal. This is fascist propaganda. I don't care what you call it. You are a fascist. You want our government to be fascist, and so you're producing media to encourage other people to see political differences not as a thing that we debate and then we vote based on, but that we hunt down and murder our political opponents. And anyone who dares to do journalism, investigative journalism, even just political commentary that you find to be inconvenient, we don't think that we should murder those people, but an increasing number of Americans do think that that's the solution. You should murder them, and that comes in a couple different forms. One, you have memes like this, and we're gonna show you others that Trump has already enthusiastically tweeted out, the idea that you should hunt down your political opponents. But we've also seen over the past couple of months, now if a politician proposes something you don't like, for instance, if Beto O'Rourke says the AR-15s shouldn't be legally sold anymore, then they just say, oh, we'll kill you if you try to enforce this law. There was Ben Shapiro with something about tax breaks for churches. He said, I'll kill you. If you're a truant officer, if you're Beto O'Rourke and you come, I will murder you. Which is not, that doesn't mean necessarily that these individuals, Ben Shapiro, has really changed in how they think about politics, but they feel much more free to simply say, no, we think we have the numbers, we think we have the guns, and so if the country moves in a direction I don't like, I'm gonna start gunning people down. And Trump, more than anything else, has made those people feel comfortable to threaten to murder their political opponents.
And so we've gone, and you know what, and if you can keep denying that there's some connection with this, but again, if you've seen it, which obviously we're not gonna show, the videos that Trump has retweeted, it's a very similar look.
Yes.
It could be produced by the same person. I know it's not, or maybe it is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be because it's pretty crude and easily edited. So after you see your president, your king posting videos like this and laughing about it, you go, I'm gonna do one. Maybe I can get him in his good graces too. Maybe he'll tweet something at me and say, good job. Nice job, foot soldier. So there's people that are like this. We saw the guy who sent some bombs to CNN.
Yes.
And I'm blanking on his name right now. But then after,
Sayak.
Sayak openly admitted, yeah, I was doing it for Donald Trump because these are his enemies. Not just CNN, but also political enemies. Many of the people that also appear in this same thing. The connections are way too stark for you to deny it anymore. We talked about the congressman that got shot, the Republican congressman who got shot on the softball field. Suddenly it's Bernie Sanders people because he was a Bernie Sanders supporter and Bernie Sanders is stoking what? But you can't find the connection between a video that looks just like the one you did and actual actions that have been carried out by supporters of yours. You can't find that connection at all.
Yeah.
It's because you don't want to.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders has been crystal clear that he would never accept any form of violence or anything like that. Donald Trump, not so much. Loves to joke about the congressman who assaulted a reporter right before he got elected. Thinks that's hilarious. Jokes about attacking protesters in his rallies. He surrounds himself with thousands of his fans, and then they joke about attacking protesters. Again, it's just the normalization of fascism and fascist language and fascist imagery. That's all it is. This is what we were talking about before he got elected.
Yes.
We said to take this seriously. Now we're a couple of years into it, and journalists are being killed, and supporters of his are trying to either, like the lieutenant in the Coast Guard wanted to start a race war.
Yes.
We know supporters of his wanted to kill Somali immigrants in Minnesota. Thankfully, they were stopped. Cesar Sayoc apparently was too much of a moron to actually successfully assassinate these media figures and politicians, but he certainly tried, and that is what Trump hath wrought. That's the language they usually use for this sort of thing. And working at an organization that's being lumped in and being, it's not a joke. Like some people treat politics as if this is like supporting like a baseball team or something.
Yes.
It's
That's
not.
exactly what they
People's
do.
lives are being threatened. We can see it. There's a lot of people who work here. People who are good enough to come on our shows. You should not be threatened because you disagree with these people.
And they're all out there and they're crazy and they have access to you via social media. And now because all of our information is accessible on the internet and we've seen people get doxxed and their information be out there and then they come and confront you in some way. And it's a very dangerous situation, especially when that person thinks they're appeasing to their Trump God. And as you notice, Trump doesn't ever come out and condemn something. It'll be maybe his representative saying, oh, he strongly condemns it, but he'll never come out and directly say, I condemn this. And so people, they continue to get encouraged.
I was just literally, I was hoping, as you were saying that, I was literally looking up. Has he said anything yet?
Nope.
Still
He's
hasn't said
tweeted,
anything.
he didn't find time for this. He did
Yes.
find time to encourage people to vote for Spicer on Dancing with the Stars. He did that this morning, didn't find time to talk about this. There was a tweet though, from Stephanie Grisham, who is technically the press secretary, although that doesn't mean anything anymore. She tweeted earlier this morning, real Donald Trump has not yet seen the video. He will see it shortly, but based upon everything he's heard, he strongly condemns this video. So this is so that he doesn't have to say it because that would be disheartening to his followers who want to imagine that someday he will begin gunning down the people that they hate. He hasn't seen it. What has he been on Twitter for maybe 10 hours since then? It's been like 12 hours since it came out. So yeah, about 10 hours, he's been actively tweeting about any number of different things. He's obviously seen it. And there's a good chance that he will end up tweeting it out. Honestly, let's not pretend otherwise. If we can bring up this tweet, he retweeted a cartoon of a train running down a CNN reporter. Now, that is only one reporter or outlet being murdered, but is that actually morally different from what we're talking about today? That he did that 2 years ago, that he liked the idea that he's gonna murder a reporter. I don't think it is actually that different. Now, thankfully, as I implied earlier, the media has been okay. The media's been okay in responding to this Trump violent video. Jayar produced a mashup of some of what they've said. Here you go.
You know, I think we need to get back to real truth in political campaigns.
It's just dumb. I mean, it's just, who thought this was a good idea? And especially if you're a supporter of the president.
Also, he's beating up a black woman in there who's Maxine Waters. He's beating her up. You know, it's really despicable.
Congress people, Maxine Waters, Mitt Romney, Adam Schiff, Bernie Sanders, President Obama, the Clintons, my father, you can't kill him again, but whatever.
This is outrageous. This hurts the president. It's not a good thing to have debated in the country, and I think it's ridiculous.
If this were the opposite and it happened in an Obama event, you'd be screaming bloody murder.
To do something like this is just stupid, and it obviously backfired, as it should. It should be condemned. It shouldn't have been aired.
Poor taste and entirely unnecessary, I think, is the conclusion here at this table.
How easy for all of you judging me that I'm offended and upset by the video. You try doing this when a member of your family is continued to have this happen over and over and over again. And it doesn't seem to matter to anybody in Trump world whatsoever.
So that's good. The poor taste seems a bit weak, but hey, at least there was a negative response, so that's something.
That's overwhelming from that point of view. Like, oh my, we said poor taste.
Exactly.
And every time someone, I don't want to get too far on responses from Fox News, but every time you see, and we mentioned Kill Me, we'll talk later about how he had something to say in opposition to the president. Someone else sitting next to him is always like, oh man, we're gonna hear about this one. They figure this is a brave move to mention reality when you see this happen. Like, that was actually in bad taste. Who did it? And they won't go as far as say, and we can't wait to hear what the president has to say about this. You only have to say it's in bad taste, just for those people. just for those people who did it.
Yeah, and I was like, is Tucker on already? I don't know. I don't know when his show is on. Do you think he's gonna condemn it? Maybe.
Oh.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Twice a year he tries to pretend that he's, a free thinker, that he's not a dogmatic conservative. So maybe, but I kind of doubt it. I think that he's probably gonna joke about it. Laura Ingraham definitely is just gonna laugh about it. Sean Hannity obviously is gonna mention it. But I was just imagine imagine Sean Hannity's show. Imagine, hypothetically, horrific situation. Let's say before the election, and I wondered this before the midterms. Let's say group of Democratic candidates is gunned down by a Trump supporter. Do you think Sean Hannity that day says, you know what? We've moved beyond where I can follow. You know what? I've been enthusiastic because I support Donald Trump, but at a certain point, I'm a journalist, and so I care what happens to other journalists, and this has gone too far. I am revoking my support for the president until he condemns any form of political violence. Does anyone actually think that you could draw any line that some people would not pass? If Trump just imprisoned 100 journalists today, what percentage of his supporters would drop off?
There's no reason to believe that journalists would be the thing that would make them have this problem. They had no problem when bombs were being sent, as I mentioned earlier, to news outlets. They have no problem when threats are being made and then are carried out on when the white supremacists down in Charlottesville came down and were killing people. That went to a defense mode. That didn't go to, hey, we've crossed the line. We've inspired bad people to commit murderous actions. It doesn't cross that point. An innocent person who was in the middle of a bunch of people, many others got injured, by the way, as well. He was looking to kill more than one. It's not like he targeted one person. So if that was defended, this will be too.
Well, the thing is that greed is really what controls, because it's a thought that, hey, I'm a Fox News anchor or host and I am financially set and secure, so why don't I continue on this path? I don't necessarily need to think about the person on the right, the person at the left, the person in other angles, but as long as I'm good, it's good. And I think that's truly a reflection of where our society is today, which is why we have so many of the issues we have, because no one's really thinking about the common good and their fellow man as much as they're thinking of making sure that they are good.
Yeah. Anyway, just a really disheartening day to see, some people good. You did a good job of trying to represent right wingers who are willing to criticize this, but there's still some people that have not come to grips with what this movement actually is. And you don't have to be a great student of history to know what direction this is going in. And the idea that American exceptionalism, come on, not us, everyone, humans are simple, dark creatures at times, honestly, that can support disgusting things if they think it's in their own interest. If they think that their identity will be benefited in some way, protected in some way by lashing out and killing people, all too often they will support that. And I don't want to see it here. And so I want people to take this threat seriously, and still some people are not.
No.
Okay, with that, we're gonna turn to another topic. Hard transition, so we're just gonna do it, but it involves Bernie Sanders. Today, Bernie Sanders released more details on how he wants to reshape corporate America. Some of this we knew, it had been teased out over the past few weeks, but some is new. And so let's turn to his corporate accountability plan. The centerpiece is a proposal to shift power to workers by requiring all large companies, that's those with at least 100 million in annual revenue, and all publicly traded companies to come under partial employee ownership. The idea is to require them to contribute 2% of their stocks annually to an employee-controlled fund until workers control 10% of the company, 20% of the company, and then pay out the dividends to those workers. So this would take place, obviously, over a period of 1 decade until eventually 20% is owned by the employees of the actual company. There would be some sort of board set up to help manage that, and the dividends would be paid out to the workers, which obviously makes the company more responsive to its workers, also provides more of a benefit for the workers to innovate and work hard and all of that. Some aspects of this plan have been proposed in other countries. There's one I think that the Labour Party, I think in the UK, is pushing that would do something like this, but to 10% of the total value. But that would certainly be a big change, and it goes beyond any of the other plans of this sort that we've seen from other candidates in the primary.
Yeah, and I think to some extent it definitely has some positive aspects, especially one I think that Bernie mentioned in terms of people feeling more invested in their workplace, which I think is maybe something he's trying to communicate to employers, to say people will be more loyal if they're invested in it and they actually, have something to benefit from it other than a piece of paycheck which they take home after taxes. But at the same time too, I just don't know how many companies would be down for this. And as we've already seen Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg go after essentially Elizabeth Warren for feeling like she's a threat to his billionaire status, I could see a number of billionaires and big businessmen coming at Bernie too for this.
Oh yeah. Look, I mean, if Mark Zuckerberg thinks that like Warren's plan would be unacceptable, he's probably hasn't hit the floor since he read about this yet. And so, and by the way, we don't have time to delve into it too much, but some news has come out about Zuckerberg over the past few days. And look, I don't want to get conspiratorial or anything, but this guy has already allowed insane misinformation to just fill his platform during an election. If it was, like if Bernie was the candidate, and some misinformation was being spread to take down Bernie, like, do you think he would look past his own economic personal interests and say, you know what, we're gonna stomp this out, we're gonna get rid of this misinformation? Like, I would be seriously worried that he would go along with it. But anyway, it doesn't just affect him, but it affects a lot. And I think I've already mentioned a few potential benefits of it, and I'll leave it to the experts to do much more than that. But it would also potentially help to stop some corporations from like pursuing paths that are just deeply immoral, like some of the companies that are polluting our waterways, companies like Facebook and others that are willing to sell your information. Like those sorts of things wouldn't necessarily be destroyed by 20% of the company going to its workers, but I trust 20% of the workers far more than I do a few self-interested and often not particularly attentive board members.
This is the hardest part, is implementing, right? How do you pull this off? Living in a country where we're sold the end game of capitalism no matter what. That allows people in this type of positions and heads of these companies to be empowered to do whatever they want for that profit margin. That's what capitalism is. No matter what, make your money. And whoever is affected by that negatively, who cares? So we're gonna have a problem even convincing enough workers to be like, oh, this is a good idea, because there's this wilderness, and we go, oh, but what if we take the power away from the rich and powerful? How will we survive? We have this childlike approach to that the rich people are supposed to give us what we deserve when we've been giving them everything that they don't deserve. So just enough people just to come on board for that to do it. And number two, this goes back to the beginnings of everything when it comes to politics, is the money in it. So unless money's out of politics, the people in charge are gonna continue to give the people that elected money to do what they want. So yeah, Bernie Sanders can get in office and then implement some policies or propose some things. Congress ain't doing anything about this. Senate isn't passing any of this stuff. It's not gonna happen that way because they're still getting paid by the people who don't want this to happen. A lot of things have to change, and I'm not saying I'm against.
Well, he's also proposed getting effectively all money out of politics.
Yeah, and like there's so many of these levels have to happen, and he's gonna get attacked for this particular approach and called a socialist trying to take all your money away when actually it's not taken away from all these people. But he's gonna get attacked on that realm, and it'll stick to a degree because people don't really know that there's other levels that have to change for it to get to where that will be effective. It would never happen, and they know that. So they'd be like, yeah, Bernie's trying to take everything from you. I hate to be the negative guy, but it would never happen.
No, I think it's a very difficult thing to pull off, especially for the point that you made in terms of the people really, they've kind of been brainwashed to think that they need the man, they need someone to control them as opposed to having their own free liberties. And so, which is why I think that in part, that's kind of why people really aren't trained to look at facts and find information, as opposed to, you just tell me what to do. You tell me what to decide, how to vote, and I'll just make that happen. And it's an unfortunate cause because so many of us actually invest in being our full 100% owned citizens and to truly want to invest and be a full-fledged member of this society as opposed to kind of just a cog in the wheel.
Donald Trump made some outlandish promises when he was running for office. He's only been able to implement those because of the help from the Senate and before the Congress has switched over, all the help that they're providing. You need help to do this stuff. If he was by himself and he's the only Republican in that branch of government that's holding any kind of power, he's already not getting a lot of things done because we flipped over flipped the Congress and then now hopefully the Senate. But no, you need help, and he's got assistance from a lot of bad people.
But yeah, Trump has also shown what you can do with executive orders as well, almost immediately after he got in. The idea too would be anyone, no matter who, if it was Amy Klobuchar, she would face a very difficult task of getting anything done. That's why it's so important that you get into office with a movement hopefully that will have been the difference in many, possibly in Senate races, but definitely in House races, could be the difference between them winning and losing. They could feel that they owe you because you were the figurehead that brought a wave, that brought them into the power. I think that could be very, very powerful too.
So with that point, I'm sorry, don't forget. With that point, if you're voting for, a lot of people, I'm making an assumption here. I think vote for a president, and be like, oh, this is the president, because I'm thinking about president. And they go down the rest of the ticket, and there's no way they've looked into the policies and approaches the rest of your voting route is taking you. So who are you voting for House and Senate that's gonna support the things you think this president's gonna do? It's not just a president thing. Like, oh, punch president. No, leave the rest blank. I don't know who those people are.
Yeah, it's a big
You know,
wonder.
it changes things. You have to. There has to be an approach that's it changes government over from the people who are actually making these decisions.
Well, I'm also going to
Go
say,
ahead.
I think that the right wing has really shot themselves in the foot in terms of how are they, like, let's say they take this plan, and let's say Sean Hannity wants to have a serious critique of it, which isn't going to happen, but what is he going to say about it? He's going to say that's socialism. He says that like Pete Buttigieg's plans are socialism. Like this is just about as pure democratic socialist of a proposal as you could get. It is worker control, not control, but a degree of control over corporations. It's still very much capitalism, but to benefit workers and at the direction of workers. This should be actually something that many at Fox should be interested in. They say that they're in favor of the forgotten masses and they prefer them over the elites, honestly. Well, then put them in control of these corporations, by the way. And you always say that you're worried about government regulations hurting small businesses. The smallest a business can be is $100 million for this to affect them, so you don't have that argument either. So look, they're gonna say that it's socialism, they're gonna say that it's communism, but they would say that raising the minimum wage by 10 cents is those things too.
Yeah.
So really fast, we can't go super in depth, but I want to give it, that was the centerpiece. It's an all-inclusive plan. It involves requiring 45% of large companies' boards to be employee elected. So again, it's not a majority, but it is much more influence over the board. Let's see, you have a Bureau of Corporate Governance for sort of federal charters that'll have ethical corporate requirements, banning stock buybacks, which we've seen used, like we give these huge corporate tax cuts to them, they get a bunch of money, then they buy their taxes back, so it doesn't actually benefit you in any way. Let's see, giving workers the right to buy a company if it goes up for sale, is closing, or moving overseas and providing financial assistance to do that, as well as restoring the corporate tax rate back to 35%, where it was before Trump cut it nearly in half. I would say that should be the starting off point. That should not be the end point, but because Trump became president, we have a lot of work to do just to get back to where we were a couple of years ago. Okay, with that, we do have to take a break, but when we come back, let's give you a little update on what's going on with Syria, with the Kurds, and Saudi Arabia as well after this.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
Welcome back, everyone. A bunch of comments and tweets coming in. I want to read a few of those. Chris Durand responded to our event update saying, I'm checking into my hotel room in Westerville right now. Tomorrow is going to be #2strong. Chris, enjoy the rally. Should be a lot of fun. Let's see. We have Mrs. Schwinn says he also murders John McCain. P.S. he's already dead. Yeah, they had to fit in just all of his enemies. I mean, Maxine Waters, as someone pointed out, and the guy has made other videos too, where he kills AOC, and it's just everyone. Basically, everyone you can think of that Trump doesn't like. This guy likes to fantasize about Trump murdering. Bernice DeBabe says, I love that Meghan McCain's still got my father in there. I get what you're saying. In this particular case, I think she's allowed to do it.
Yeah.
That's okay. Not That Donald says MSM should show the entire video, show the world the mongrel in the White House, give it a disturbing content warning, but show it. Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah,
I think.
Nope.
That's why I didn't show it on this show or on the damage report. First, everybody's already seen it anyway. And do you need to? You know what it is.
Just give it more clout. Yeah,
exactly, yeah. I think we can talk about why it's important without giving the guy the direct what he wants. It's for people to see it directly. So with that, we do have an update, by the way. I know people are excited about the rally already, but did you know that there is going to be a guest speaker? So this is tomorrow, and again, you go to tyt.com/rally at the meetup at Renaissance Westerville Polaris Hotel. We've got, she's a Bernie Sanders supporter. You might have heard of her. Susan Sarandon is going to be speaking in Ohio at tomorrow's meetup. So that should be very exciting as well. Again, tyt.com/rally to get all of the details. And there's some that we're still waiting to find out information about some of that. And you can find that out by signing up right there. And with that, why don't we jump into the news? News developments over the weekend and concern in Syria regarding Turkey's invasion of at least 30 or so kilometers of northern Syria. Their campaign against the Kurds has been very dark, and there's a lot here to update you on. But I want to jump to just a few little aspects of this, some of which I guess were expected. I had not personally expected. Because we have moved away from the area where the Kurds are being attacked and hundreds are being killed, members of the military as well as civilians, they have needed someone to aid them. So apparently the Kurds have signed some sort of cooperation agreement with Bashar Assad and the government of Syria. There are other reports saying that they're working with other either rebel or terrorist groups in the region now. So they've been forced into this horrible situation where they're allying themselves with people that no one should have to work with simply to survive. But that is a development that you should know about. Let's get to some clips, or some tweets, I should say. Trump has not been as forthcoming in information about this as you might expect after a few days. He's gotten a lot of criticism, that might be why. But he tweeted earlier today, and this is a video we're gonna show you later on. He attacked Brian Kilmeade for criticizing him, saying Brian Kilmeade over at Fox and Friends got it all wrong. We're not going into another war between people who've been fighting with each other for 200 years. Europe had a chance to get their ISIS prisoners but didn't want the cost. Let the USA pay, they said. Kurds may be releasing some to get us involved. Easily recaptured by Turkey or United Nations from where many came, but they should move quickly. Big sanctions on Turkey coming. Do people really think we should go to war with NATO member Turkey? Never-ending wars will end. So that is after the news that when some of these ISIS fighters or people affiliated with ISIS were being held in camps guarded by the Kurds, when the Turks came in and attacked them, some of the prisoners, hundreds of them, escaped, which is understandable because it's hard to guard someone when you're being killed by the Turkish military. And so now hundreds are fleeing into the countryside. And Trump tries to sort of brush that aside by saying they're easily recaptured. Yeah, good luck with that. These are people who would, in some cases, would love to commit terror attacks, perhaps in Turkey, certainly in the EU as well. So once again, we're seeing horrible developments immediately, but we're also seeing the seeds of what could become horrible developments that might take weeks or months to develop.
You see this needling he had in these tweets where he's like, hey, they can get them easily. Well, again, based off of what? Off of his own fantasy. We're talking about some of the escaped prisoners, and then after but they better move quickly. Again, it's those inserts, those phrases he throws in to be like, you better hurry up or else somebody might get hurt. You know, it continuously saying threats. You better do something about it because we're not doing anything about it anymore. In fact, we're gonna escalate the situation to make sure that you're worried about it, and you better hurry up. It's I'm trying to think of the best term for it without saying some things I shouldn't say.
It's mafia speak, that's all it is.
But it's such a disregard for human life and for everything else that's happening that isn't based off of your bottom line, which we're gonna get to more about his propensity for war as long as there's money involved.
Yeah.
But when there's people dying, who cares? It's just people that aren't here. Again, it goes back to if they hurt any Americans, there are gonna be some prices to pay. What if they hurt other humans? Oh, who cares about them?
Yeah.
Those aren't real humans.
And even when there are Americans involved, as we've seen in overseas conflicts and any kind of issues, Trump is really nowhere to be heard from. You know, sure, he'll do every now and then when he can try to, look good as he's done with a rapper before abroad. But otherwise, no, if it cannot stand to benefit him in some way, he doesn't care. And also, I can really see how he's trying to create this us-them rhetoric so that we stop seeing the Kurds as actually being whole people and so that their deaths in some way can be justifiable. And so these little terms and these stories he tells, like claiming that the Syrian-based Kurds are releasing ISIS as a means to force the US troops to engage, trying to make them seem sinister, trying to make them seem corrupt or unworthy of the US's help. It's just, we've seen this before.
Yeah, and apparently, so there's new reporting coming out from people who are familiar with his conversations with Erdogan over the past couple of years. And how we got into this situation is maybe even more embarrassing than it initially seemed. After hearing Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan threaten for 2 years to launch an assault against the Kurds in Syria, President Trump and senior administration officials did not think he would ever go through with it. 6 people with knowledge of the matter told Axios' Jonathan Swan. So effectively, he called their bluff and found out that they were not in fact bluffing. And now already hundreds and hundreds of people have lost their lives because Donald Trump is apparently terrible at poker or something like that. So whatever the excuse was for this happening, it's even worse and more embarrassing than we thought before. And that's skipping over little bits of news that happened after the main show on Friday that we didn't get to, including that Turkey has apparently been purposefully targeting our soldiers, bracketing them by firing on both sides of them to scare them out of the region. And that's something that we just allow because Donald Trump doesn't care. And so if some of our soldiers end up getting killed by Turkish shelling, he doesn't care, no skin off of his back. So that happened, and it's been a pretty dark and pretty terrible time. You've probably seen the videos of civilians that have died, kids that have been blown apart. They've been setting up, the Turkish military or Turkish affiliated groups have been setting up roadblocks. And one Kurdish female politician, her car was stopped. She was dragged out of the car. She was shot to death, and her driver was shot to death. These were not militants. These were not fighters. They didn't have weapons. They were just killed because they were a Kurdish politician. So,
and you know what? I'll let you, last thing real fast for me because I know we have more. But anytime you have anybody that's within his party that want to talk about the things that he's doing that are wrong and can't believe you'd abandon the Kurds like this, can't believe you do this, this is devastating, it's horrible, and then you just say all that stuff on Twitter and move along with your life and don't do anything else about it, I don't care what you have to say. What's the point of you being there saying those things? Let's just say it, and then I'm on record being against this. Now I'm gonna go ahead and watch it continue to happen. What's the point? What are you there for?
An example of that, actually, in just a little bit. So why don't we move to some of the pushback? We know that Trump's change in policy towards Turkey and the Kurds has not been popular, even amongst some on the right. He's been criticized by them. Trump has been criticized even on Fox News for this policy change. And so here we have a little bit of that as Brian Kilby.
It's bipartisan outrage. The president must realize he made a huge mistake and just say, listen, I had a conversation with Erdogan. He misled me like he's misled every one of the regions. It's cost lives. I think the most disturbing thing is they say hundreds of ISIS fighters have gotten out in our quest to get the worst of the worst out before the Turks got there has failed because they were already gone, and our guys had to move back because the Turks intentionally or unintentionally targeted our guys.
Yeah, it was intentionally, according to our military. But that is as strong as criticism on Fox and Friends comes for Donald Trump. Said he's made a huge mistake and he needs to reverse. That is what he later tweeted, attacking Brian Kilmeade for. He is apparently not reversing, though. He's fairly satisfied with how this is going. He doesn't care about the body count. And so he is going to continue to be criticized, including by other people at Fox. There was a foreign correspondent, Trey Yinks, who reported that, quote, there's evidence today of war crimes being committed, civilians being targeted, and ISIS prisoners escaping. Trey said, to give you a better idea about what is unfolding on the ground, Turkish forces have taken over a number of key roads in the area. He talks about the shooting that we just mentioned. He says the worst of humanity is unfolding today in Syria as President Trump tweets. Congress considers sanctions that wouldn't actually be implemented until a later date and the world watches. And so today he actually tweeted that he's going to either by executive order or possibly with the Senate have new sanctions against Turkey. And maybe at some point that'll pass, and maybe at some point it'll have an economic effect. That's not gonna bring back a single Kurd who's been killed in this conflict, though. And in my view, if you really wanna stop a genocide from happening, you don't just tax it. That generally doesn't protect people from genocide.
No.
And that's what he's doing. And so he's being criticized by some. There's even weak, I would say spineless criticism from Republican politicians. So did you see Marco Rubio's tweets? We've got one. He says this. Now, notice what's in this tweet and what's not in this tweet. So Marco Rubio tweeted, ISIS killers will now escape and boost chances of a resurgence. One of few moderate pro-US groups in region now allied with Assad and Putin. Syria's future now controlled by Russia and Iran. A significant blow to Israel's security and boost to Iran's goal of regional dominance. I would say that that is what many call the passive voice, because it implies that this situation has just developed. Look at all these bad things. I don't know who caused it, I'm only a senator. What am I supposed to do about it? And he doesn't actually mention it. And so the hashtag say his name has been trending to get Republican politicians to actually acknowledge who it is that has caused this.
Well, so what's the point then? Again, it's to be on record and say, hey, I said something about it. I actually don't care. This is, so I know this is an ongoing theme, but Trump does these horrible things. He's been doing them for a few years now. And then Republican politicians want to act like it's just him once they get asked about it. No, you're the same type of person.
Yep.
You're the reason why he's in office. You're the one who started fomenting this kind of resentment for the country. Keep it real. And then when someone comes in and carries those things out without the veil that you're used to carrying it out with, like the way Marco Rubio's trying to do right there, by putting veils over his tweets, we can see it. He's just way too crass at it. When people ask him directly, I know it's a shift from when he was saying, hey, I want China to help out and investigate more of the Bidens. And everybody said he's just joking. And they asked him again. And he said, I'm not joking.
Yeah.
So he can't even go with your talking point to absolve him of the responsibilities for the things that he says. So all you're mad about is that he's not as good at this as you are as far as masking it. That's the only thing you have in opposition to Trump.
Oh, absolutely. Otherwise, they enjoy what he does and the benefits that he gives them. But at the same time, the fact that he doesn't use tact or any kind of stealth ways to pretend that, he's not racist, capitalistic, bigot, all these other things, and sexist, and, the list runs, then that's the real problem. Because, hey, how can you keep up this whole ideology that the status quo and everything is equal and fair and that we are doing the best as we can, all the Americans, if you're really out there telling the truth?
Yeah, and he tweeted a little bit more. He had a tweet that was like, oh, I see, the sides may be working with Syrian government or Russia or Iran. I'm sure it'll all work out for them. We're 7,000 miles away. Which, I mean, if you were an ally of the US militarily, you should just check out now. The idea that, we're far, what do we care if you get killed? Just horrible. And in that tweet, by the way, he says the same obvious falsehood that has been used since this policy change was made was that, hey, this looks dark, but this is about ending the wars. He just wants to get troops out of the Middle East. Well, this weekend he announced that he's sending 2,800 troops to Saudi Arabia. So how did that work out? The idea that this is about ending wars. Donald Trump doesn't care about ending wars, okay? He just doesn't care about the Kurds. He's very happy to go in defense of Saudi Arabia. He has interest in terms of our military-industrial complex and also his own personal real estate interest when it comes to the Saudi royal family.
How many miles are we away from Saudi Arabia?
About 7,000, I would imagine. It's about one from here to Syria away. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Adrienne and Jayar, great to have you on. Thank you, everybody. We're gonna take a short break. We come back, Brooke is gonna be joining the show and leading you through an awesome second hour, so stick around.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.